We are live. We are live, and I'm coming at you with 5. Welcome to another edition of Gavin Richard Presents here on my channel, GBoot2786, and also on Facebook. Whoever you are, wherever you are, I hope you are all doing blessed and great this and highly favored this Sunday morning or afternoon, wherever you are. I said Sunday morning, it's afternoon. But hope you all are feeling blessed despite the circumstances. If you're breathing, then you're achieving. And today I have a special guest on. Our special guest is Scott Ross. Scott is a private investigator out in the California area in Los Angeles. And Scott, of course, has served as a private investigator in a number of cases, and including a few high-profile cases such as Michael Jackson, Bill Cosby, Robert Blake, and a few others, just to mention.
Few others.
But while we cases, we're also going to be talking about his work in the field of criminology. He's trying to educate people in that area as of now. And also, we're going to be talking to him in relation to what's happening in Minnesota and across the country right now. So everyone, please welcome Scott to the show. Scott, how are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
Right.
I'm good. It's nice and warm here. It's, no complaints. It's, it's quiet.
Yeah, it's hot and miserable here in Louisiana.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, I don't know if the heat is different over there, but it's real. Louisiana, what makes it worse is it's very humid.
It's not humid here actually at all, and I don't know. It's it's not that terrible. I've been back there in the Midwest, and this time of year, it's not fun. But anyway, moving on.
Right, that's okay. It's all good. And Scott, you are also a radio show host. I forgot to mention that part. All Things.
Well, not anymore. I had a radio show called All Things PI, and unfortunately, the radio station KCAA, which I absolutely the people there were spectacular, but the problem was that the time of the show was between 9 and 10 in the morning, and the problem being is that those are hours that I needed to be in court. And I'm not in control of a defendant's schedule or somebody's schedule, so I had to unfortunately sort of cut it short. But I enjoyed it, and I'd like to do it again. So at some point, it would be nice.
Yeah, at some point. Well, you ever want to get back on radio? Right now the best way to get involved is on YouTube. It's on StreamYard and Instagram. I mean, that's how people are getting their media today.
And I'd love to do it. And, that sort of brings us back to what you were saying initially, the whole criminology thing. I recently ran into a couple of very fascinating people. There's been a young lady that's worked for me for a little over a year. Her name is Jamie. I'll leave it at that. Jamie has a series of disabilities, but she's incredibly intelligent. And the truth of the matter is, she would like to become a private investigator. Certainly smart enough to do it, but one of the things that I found fascinating, I met this other young lady I was out of state working, and she's going to school studying criminology. And as intelligent as she clearly appears to be, in fact, I actually got her a position, an intern position with a private investigator friend of mine in that state. But I didn't have the heart to tell her, and I hope she doesn't see this, I didn't have the heart to tell her she's too small. Jamie is never going to become a police officer because of her disabilities. This little girl is a little girl. She's too small. She could not prevent me from doing anything unless she just wanted to shoot me. And that's really not how you teach people. So it got me thinking about all of these schools that offer criminology and the fact that what they're not teaching is criminal defense aspect of criminology. They teach all of these kids today how to become police officers. This is what you need to know to become a police officer. But you know what? Not everybody's going to become a police officer. Either you weigh too much, you don't weigh enough, you're too short, you're too tall, police officers and people who want to be cops and detectives and what have you, I respect that. But there's a finite number of positions. You have pretty much, because of these idiotic shows like CSI, they glamorize things, and you have all of these people going to school to try and get an education so that they can become something of that nature. And God bless them, I hope they do. But the fact remains that not everybody's going to get that. And so people are going through these schools, getting an education that is not going to do them any good.
Yeah.
But there's another avenue. There's what I do. There is being a private investigator, doing criminal defense. You don't have to have been a police officer. I was never a police officer. My friend Adam Dawson, who, if you get arrested in Los Angeles and it's in the media, if I'm not handling it, Adam Dawson is handling it. The bottom line is Adam was a reporter, but the fact is that these schools don't educate people to understand criminal defense. And that's my complaint. And that's what would motivate me to want to get back into the media or on a radio show to educate people that you don't have to become a cop to become a detective. I handle just as many, if not more, homicides than most police officers do. And the fact remains is that, the fact remains is that there is another avenue for people to learn how to do this and a way to do things. And that will never be taught because that's just not, again, I've contacted multiple schools. I've contacted several colleges. Either I don't get a response, or the fact is that they're all run by former law enforcement officers, and those police officers just want to teach being a police officer. So let's take that and move to Minnesota. That's the problem that you have in Minnesota. You have these police chiefs that come in and they set a policy, and that's great. The problem is the practical application.
It's the enforcement of it. Yeah.
Correct. It doesn't make it to the street. There was a very famous case not long ago. I believe I want to say it was in Kentucky or Tennessee, where a deputy sheriff arrested somebody for being in possession of a firearm, concealed weapon. And the person didn't have the proper paperwork. And the deputy and the sheriff himself cut him loose. They refused to file charges against him because the sheriff believes that people have the right. He's an incredible Second Amendment advocate, and believes that he has the right to carry a concealed weapon. So again, you got to remember, a sheriff's department is in a position, the sheriff is in a position to pick and choose to tell his people what laws to follow, what laws not to follow. And the chief of police, once these guys get out on the street, Daryl Gates, who was the chief of police of Los Angeles, who was the biggest problem of all of them, there are still people working under the teachings of Daryl Gates, and those people become training officers. And even though you've gone through a series of William Bratton and I forget the other, some of the other, but you've gone through all these chief of police years later, after the fact, who try to reform the department. The problem is that once these guys get on the street, until the advent of video cameras that they wear, and like I said, everybody with a cell phone walking around playing Cecil B. DeMille and making these films, these cops can kind of do whatever they want to do, which we saw.
Right. It's not the issue of the thing is, it's not the issue of them being recorded. It's the fact that they don't give a shit, or they don't care about what happens while they're being recorded.
Couldn't care less.
They could care less. And you saw that.
Right. I'm in charge. When you have a guy who's been charged, or you have a guy who's had allegations of 12 prior misconducts. And
he had 17, by the way.
Oh.
He had 18. Yeah. Derek Chauvin had about 18. And that's a failure on the police chief and his commander. Yeah.
I don't want to blame the chief of police because I don't know anything about them, but I would be more inclined to believe that it's the strength of the union that does this. The police officers' unions, they back people that are being elected. So if you have a chief of police, in this particular case, you have an African American chief of police, and we think he's going to be a little too lenient. So the rank and file of the police department, who are probably a higher number of white because it is Minnesota, and they back somebody else, then the union puts money toward a mayor who's going to bring in somebody completely different and lose that chief of police. And it all becomes very, very political. But 17 complaints, that falls under, and doing criminal defense will be the first one to say, I hate this adage, but that's where there's smoke, there's fire. I mean, that's kind of basic. But there's two things that I think are fascinating. I assume you saw this. I haven't been following a lot of it, but his wife left him and filed for divorce.
Right, I saw that.
Okay. Do you know why that is?
Yes, I have a feeling with what that's about.
Go ahead. What's your opinion?
Does it have anything to do with community property?
It has to do with protecting assets.
Protecting
It's
assets? Yeah.
absolute nonsense. All of a sudden, the wife, they're trying to protect the wife. That, oh, I think he's a terrible human being. I wouldn't stay with somebody who would do this. I'm leaving. So she's protected. And of course, he'll just sign off the property because now that he's been fired and he has no income, he can, they can make the argument that in the lieu of alimony, which he is unable to afford. And so it protects the assets. So if and well, hopefully when he goes to prison, it's absolute nonsense.
Right.
And it happens all the time.
It
And it
happens all
happens
the time.
here. Yeah.
Yeah, it's
Somebody gets
bullshit.
arrested and it is bullshit. Somebody gets arrested, the wife files for a divorce, goes publicly and says, what a scumbag, and again,
Right.
it's just protecting her portion of the assets.
Yeah, he's a
You know?
scumbag. She wouldn't support someone like that, but they were married for 10 years. So, okay. When you get married, I already, I know when you get married, usually your spouse shows their true colors and so forth, before the vow, after the vows are made. But,
Well, but in this particular case, so that was step number one. Step number two, again, I don't know why everybody's upset that they didn't file first degree murder. It's not premeditated. They'd have to be able to prove that he got up in the morning and said, I'm going to go kill Mr. Floyd today.
Well, but what's interesting though that we learn is that, well, hold on a minute. We know now from the bar owner that George Floyd and Derek Chauvin had worked together with each other. Now, that's very interesting. Now, she couldn't attest. I think they both did security. Now, no one can contest whether they actually knew each other or necessarily they may have known of each other at best. But that is very interesting point to point out. The other thing too is just to get back with the incident that actually happened, because we've talked about this. This whole thing supposedly occurred over a $20 bill that was supposedly for a forgery, which is not a violent offense.
Right.
It wouldn't require 4 police officers.
Well, more importantly, the issue being is they still have the burden of proof to understand and know that he knew that it was a forgery. Somebody could have handed him a bad 20 and he was just moving on.
And that happens all the time.
People walk into banks and pass bad bills all the time. And again, they don't necessarily know they're doing it. And the bank has on numerous occasions turned around and handed somebody back a 20. But when all is said and done, you have to be able to prove that. And that's where, that's where this is going to be an issue is now there's no way to even prove or disprove that he knew that it was a bad bill. But yes, it's still a nonviolent crime. It didn't warrant that behavior. That's correct. You froze on me. You still with me, Gavin? Gavin? I don't know what to do. Okay, so I don't know if I'm still on, but I can still keep talking. And the interesting aspect I think I lost Gavin. Text message, what am I getting? Got frozen, hold on. Okay. Hope, Jamie, you don't get too mad at me for using your name. What am I doing?
Yeah, Scott, I'm back. Sorry about that, everyone.
There you are.
Yeah, I have to go in a different part of the house now because the area well, everybody knows, but the area that I'm in just doesn't get good connection. So even despite the extension I have. So at any rate, yeah, Scott, we were just talking about the officer, and I think the last thing we talked about was the charges that he was facing was manslaughter, second-degree manslaughter, and third murder.
Oh, okay. I don't know what the difference would be. I don't know Minnesota. Here it would be a voluntary manslaughter with it has an intent to kill, but it's more based on a blatant disregard. So by doing something completely reckless that could actually cause the death. And so it would be a voluntary manslaughter here. It still carries, I think it's like 20 years, at least 20 years.
Well,
In California, I'm just referring to California. I don't know anything about Minnesota law.
right. Well, I'm actually up on the legislator's website in Minnesota. I'm going to share the statute with everyone so that they could see. Of course, this is the 2019 Minnesota statute. This is murder in the third degree. It says whoever without intent to affect the death of any person causes the death of another by perpetuating an act imminently dangerous to others and evincing a depraved mind without regard for human life is guilty of murder in the third degree, may be sentenced to imprisonment for not more than 25 years. Whoever without intent to cause death proximately causes the death of a human being by directly or indirectly unlawfully selling, giving away. Oh well, that doesn't apply here.
Can I stop you there real quick because it's interesting to talk about differences between states. So the statute that you just read by California law would be called an involuntary manslaughter because what you're doing is you've taken away the intent to kill. It's the blatant and reckless disregard. Now, another case that I worked on, another case that was in the media was Conrad Murray. Dr. Conrad Murray, who was charged with killing Michael Jackson, was charged with an involuntary manslaughter. Involuntary manslaughter in the state of California carries a maximum of 4 years and is considered to be a non-violent crime. And because it's a non-violent crime, it's a 50%. And that's why Conrad Murray spent 2 years in prison.
Okay.
He didn't go to prison. They kept him in LA County jail. He didn't even go to
Right.
prison.
He didn't go in the main population anyway. He was protected. Maybe not protected, but it wasn't a maximum security prison.
Well, it's still 3,800. He was in row 3,800, which is high profile, and what's called a K10, which is a keep away. So he did not have a cellmate, nobody to bother him, but he's still in a very, very bad. He in theory he would have been better off in state prison, but yeah, he was a keep away. He was a K10, so he was not able to deal with other inmates, although they're able to communicate because the cells are next to each other. So he probably talked to some people there.
Sure.
Yeah.
In Louisiana, what we have, obviously, we have first degree murder or felony murder when you have the specific intent to kill and you're in the commission or to cause bodily harm, and you're in the commission of an enumerated offense like armed robbery or aggravated rape, something of that nature. And then when you have the second degree, it doesn't require a felony, an enumerated felony. It just means you intend to kill or
heat of the passion. It's sort of an instant action. Heat of passion.
Well, I thought heat of passion would be more like manslaughter, like heat of the moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, again, I'm just telling you about California.
Different states, yeah.
Right. It's funny, and let's move back and forth, go over to Cosby. It's interesting. So I didn't really understand this, but Cosby was in, obviously, Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is a Commonwealth, and this is where it gets really interesting. And I don't know and most people, I didn't know, personally did not know what, in fact, a Commonwealth was, and I have since learned. And along the lines of what you're talking about from state to state to state. So a Commonwealth, when they were set up in the 17th century, the theory being is that let's use, for example, let's use Pennsylvania. So the Quakers who were running Philadelphia, and the Mennonites, the Germans that were running Pittsburgh area, Lancaster County, Western Pennsylvania, as opposed to Eastern, didn't want to live by each other's rules. And so they set up the Commonwealth, and in a Commonwealth, county law supersedes state law. So the statutes in a county, I'm working with a really terrific young lady, Karen Morrison, right now, who is starting up sort of an innocence project thing in Virginia. And Virginia is also a Commonwealth. And it's one of the frustrations is that the laws from the county to county to county to county may vary in how they're done. When I went back to do Cosby, I was required, in order for me to sit with Mesereau and to work the trial with Mesereau, they said in no uncertain terms I had to go get a license from Pennsylvania, and they're not issued by the state. They're issued by a county. They're like weapons permits. They're statewide, but you have to adhere to the county's particular rules. So I had to go to Montgomery County and get one. But that's what I'm talking about. So again, in the situation we're referring to, by California standards, they would be charging him with an involuntary manslaughter, which does not have the intent to kill. That's what you just read. And again, by California standards, maximum prison is only 4 years. That's what Conrad Murray was tagged with.
Yeah. And he's also been charged with second-degree manslaughter, and second-degree manslaughter, my understanding, if I read the Minnesota statute correctly, I'll go back here and pull it up again for everyone so that they could see. I think it only carries a maximum of 10 years in prison.
Well, and it's going to be up to the judge, but they don't have to necessarily run concurrent. They can run consecutively. I've had numerous cases where they run consecutive. One case I had, this child molesting case, the guy was sentenced to 17 years. And upon completion of that, the other lesser allegations kicked in, but he had to complete 85% of 17 years before, so again, they don't have to run consecutively. So he could, in theory, be sentenced to 20 years on the third degree, and then sentenced to another 10 years on the lesser charge. But the other thing you have to remember too is he also has constitutional issues. He also violated specific civil rights. So the feds can step in. It's not
right.
It's a completely different case, but it will carry more time. Classic example, and again, this was a very long time ago. People may not remember, but the LAPD Rampart case.
Remember that?
Ray Perez, the protagonist, if you will, the main player. Ray Perez was sentenced to state time, and once he was released from the state time, was turned over to the feds, and he spent some time in federal custody before he was released, because again, he pled out. So it was a little bit different than going to trial. And it's the same way with Rodney King. It's the same way with the police were charged at the county level, tried in Simi Valley, acquitted, whatever, and then retried at the federal level, where they were all I don't think Timothy Wind was convicted. Timothy Wind is now an attorney in Indiana, I believe.
Okay.
So they were, again, they were ultimately convicted at the federal level of civil rights violations.
Civil rights violations, right? Yeah. And George Herbert Walker Bush was the one who campaigned. Well, he championed that. When he went did a press conference, talked about how racial prejudice should never be tolerated, and had all of those officers fired. And then after that. And it's funny you mentioned Daryl Gates earlier, Scott, because Daryl Gates was the one who initiated, I guess, this paramilitary of he militarized the Los Angeles Police Department using those tactics. And he actually resigned after the LA riots, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you resign and you keep your pension. You get fired and you get demoted a week before you get fired, and you get a lesser pension. And that's why he did what he did. It's the same thing. And again, LA County, it's the same thing with Lee Baca, the LA County sheriff, who was ultimately brought up on felony federal charges. Mike Corona, who is the sheriff of Orange County, California, Newport Beach, the fancy schmancy part of town. And during Mike Corona's corruption trial, everybody that got up there and testified said, I gave money to Corona and Baca. I gave money to Corona and Baca. And everybody was saying, well, why isn't Lee Baca sitting next to you? And again, it's Los Angeles. It's what Los Angeles does. I worked for a very, very famous attorney here in Los Angeles for 6 years. And he represented some major Armenian mafia players who I think who is in custody now in federal prison. And he chartered a plane and took Lee Baca to Armenia. These are known criminals. And when Lee Baca was the sheriff, they got a private jet and paid to have Lee Baca go spend a week in Armenia. Why? I mean, what is LA County? Who gives a crap about, you know what I'm saying? I mean, what is law enforcement, or what does that have anything to do with anything? And I don't know if he took a vacation. I don't know if he took his paycheck with him. I don't know, whatever.
Yeah. So. That's interesting. Armenian. So was it the Kardashians?
Yeah.
Who knows? I mean, they own everything now.
I gotta tell you, I met Bobby a couple times. I knew Johnny Cochran. I know, again, I'm still friends with Carl Douglas, and right. Bobby was actually a nice guy. I didn't know any of his family, but he was a nice guy. He was,
Yeah.
Yeah. He was pleasant to communicate with. Let's put it that way.
Right. So, how did you get involved with Tom Mesereau?
Oh. Unbeknownst to most people, the real story, Harlan Braun and I had a case involving a medical professional who was charged with a sex crime. There's a specific unit that deals with that, with sex crimes, and I don't know if it's at the time. I don't know if it was medical professionals or all professionals, but this was a doctor who was charged with a sex crime. The DA, who was completely, in our opinion, was completely insane, was trying a case.
Reminds us of someone we know.
What's that?
Reminds us of someone we know.
What am I missing?
Pennsylvania, DA, crazy.
Oh, yeah. I have several other issues regarding that whole Pennsylvania case, but the point being is that Tom had a paramedic that responded to an accident scene. This woman was on the ground, and apparently he cut her blouse open and did the chest massage and saved her life. And the boyfriend reported the paramedic as copping a feel, basically playing with this girl while she was unconscious, even though my understanding is he revived her. And so Tom was in trial before ours. His trial was going before ours. And so I told Harlan Braun that I was going to go watch the trial. And so when I went in to watch the trial, to watch Tom, and I was incredibly impressed. So when I went in to watch the trial, I went up to Tom and I introduced myself, and I told him why I was there and who I was. And he's like, yeah, it's fine, So I sat in the back of the room and I watched Tom, and he was acquitted, by the way. His paramedic was acquitted. And he did an amazing, he's Tom. Did an amazing job. He's Tom. And then when Harlan told Robert Blake to go get a new attorney, and he ended up with Tom, I went into Harlan and I said, hey, that's that guy. And we won our trial too, by the way. Our doctor was acquitted. Anyway, when Tom took over, I went in and I told Harlan that this guy, Tom Mesereau, was that same attorney, and he asked me to stay with him just to sort of get him oriented through the prelim. And I did, and Tom really liked my work. So when he left Blake, after the prelim I left, I lost you again. So when Tom left Blake, he got hired by Michael Jackson, and he called me and asked me if I wanted to go do Michael Jackson. And we've been working together ever since. But I lost you. I don't know if you're able to hear me.
Yeah, I'm back. Sorry.
That's okay. Were you able to hear what I was saying or what I had said?
The last thing I heard is you walked up to Tom and said hello. And
well, what I was saying is that that when Tom took over Robert Blake, since I knew who he was, and I basically went to Harlan and I told Harlan I was going to stay with Tom and get him through the preliminary hearing, which I did. And since he was using my files, I wanted to make sure that he knew what he had and understood everything. And I had worked on Blake's case for almost 2 years by that time, year and a half. And it was just too much money and too much time and energy invested to wash my hands of it. And when Tom got hired on Michael Jackson, shortly after he told Blake to get another attorney, he called me up and said, listen, I'm going to go up to Santa Barbara to do Jackson. Would you like to go? And I said, sure. So we've been working together ever since. So it's been since 2002, 2003.
Yeah, Michael Jackson's thing was around, I think it was around.
The trial was in 05. The trial was
right.
in 05. Yeah, that I know.
But he got arrested around 2003, 2000. Yeah.
But I didn't come in until I started working with Tom. I think it was in around October of 04 and then through the end of the trial. So I'm saying, but before that, again, with Blake. So I started working with Tom, in 2002. Yeah, 18 years.
Yeah. What was it like to work with Michael Jackson?
I had virtually little to zero contact with him, other than when we would walk into court, Michael would say, "Good morning, Scott. Thank you for being here." I never understood what that was all about. But I had no contact with him at all. In fact, I remember when Tom first brought me on, he said, "This is going to be a unique case where you're probably never going to have a conversation with the client." All right. I like his music. I'm not a groupie. I'm not a fan type person. That doesn't. Yeah. I deal with a lot of celebrities, and it really doesn't impress me much. Pay your bill.
You're not starstruck or anything like that.
No, not at all. But, pay your bill. That's what impresses me.
Yeah.
There's a picture of I've known the Stallone family for many, many years. There's a picture of Sylvester and me in my office on the wall. I can't send that to Wells Fargo and say, "Here's my house payment." They don't care.
That's true.
Yeah, and again, the truth of the matter is, I was contacted by Nareg Gorgon when they charged Conrad Murray, and I took a lot of heat, and Tom was not really thrilled with me, but
right,
it is what it is, and so I stepped in and I tried to work with Dr. Murray because I still don't believe that he did anything intentional. And the backstory on that is I had a very long relationship with Dr. Arnie Klein. Arnie Klein, as you know, was
Michael's dermatologist. Yeah.
Correct. And the fact remains that the medical records that were ultimately admitted showed that Arnie, and again, God love Arnie, he's passed away. He was a very nice man. But the bottom line is Michael started on propofol in 1991. And I don't really see how Conrad Murray can be held responsible, if you are on medication and you have a doctor, you walk into the new doctor's office, or the doctor says, "I can't help you anymore," and sends you to the next one. They don't just take away your medication. They don't just cut you off like that. And all of this crap that you can't use propofol at home. Most people don't have the facilities, but that's not true. There is no regulation in the state of California that says you can't take it home with you, whatever. So Michael was very aware of propofol prior to this, and I just think it's wrong to blame Dr. Murray personally. So, and a lot of people get really angry with me for that, but nothing I can do. What can I tell you?
Well, that was the question I was going to ask, because even with I was curious about that, because I had heard that was something. My father's a pharmacist, so he knows about the effects with propofol, and he even said, well, that's not something. I guess it would be safe to say, if you're going to have something like that, since there's no law in California, as you say, it would be best, obviously, do it where you have all the necessary.
Look, I know it's a stupid analogy, and you can own a horse in California and have a horse stall in your backyard if you want to bring it into your living room. Kind of stupid, but there's no law against it.
Right.
If that's what you want to do, again, incredibly stupid, but you're welcome to. Listen, when I was a kid growing up, my brother used to hang out with a bunch of biker clubs, and he used to keep his Harley in the living room. Whatever. It's stupid, but there's no law against parking your motorcycle in the living room. And there's no law that says that propofol can't be used outside the confines of a hospital. So,
Right.
and to say that somebody is being negligent, and your father, perfect example, ask him. You can't just tell somebody, listen, I know you've been taking, I don't know, pick a drug. I know you've been taking Dilaudid for the past 12 years. You're done. You can't take it anymore. It's going to cause a lot of problems.
Right.
Anyway, so
If someone has an addiction, like Oxycontin
right,
or something like that, narcotics.
you get them off of it, but you can't just walk in there and say, yeah, you're done. And I
Yeah.
don't believe for one second that Conrad Murray thought, oh, great, I get to work with Michael Jackson, make all of this money, so I think I'll just kill him. That's just beyond stupid,
Well,
I just.
I'm not too familiar of the criminal case with Dr. Murray, but I did want to ask you, since you brought up that point with Michael, this recent docu-series that came out with Leaving Neverland. I think well, you already know where I'm going with it. I personally think the story is bullshit, but
Well, it can't get any further from reality. The bottom line is Jimmy Safechuck allegedly making these claims that Michael kept calling him. Look, bottom line is I can't prove whether he did or he didn't, and who cares. The point being is that Jimmy Safechuck was a non-entity, and I've been getting internet feedback like, that I'm an idiot and I don't know what I'm talking about. Jimmy Safechuck was never on our radar because he never was going to testify. Let's fast forward over to what's his face, to Mr. Cosby. We got a list of 19 potential what are called prior bad act, 404B. In California,
right.
it's 1108, whatever. We got a list of 19 potential prior bad acts in our case, and they were pretty much the same in the first trial, but the judge is now going to allow 5 people to testify, and we were not being told who they were. So it necessitated my doing pretty thorough backgrounds on everybody. And then once we got the list of the names, but again, in discovery rules, they have to turn this information over 30 days prior to trial. Okay, so if Jimmy Safechuck's not on the list, he ain't coming in. So Michael can call anybody he wants. Michael could have called the freaking Pope. He ain't coming in. It doesn't matter. It's not up to Michael to call anybody. So for Safechuck to sit there and say, he did this, he begged me, he did whatever, whether he did or not is from a legal standpoint completely moot. Doesn't matter.
Right.
Wade Robson, Wade Robson. It's funny because you and I have known each other for a while. We've spoken on numerous occasions. Wade Robson, in his deposition in the first civil trial that was dismissed, said that I interviewed him for 30 minutes. And again, it sort of became a joke for the people who know me because good luck keeping me to a 30-minute conversation.
Well, we're at 40 right now.
I have friends that I have a friend that I have 2 friends from high school that that I've known literally 45 years, 50 years. And they'll call me just to say what's going on. And, I keep them on the phone for 40 minutes. It just, I'm a talker. I'm a yacker. That's why I did so well on the radio, because I could talk all day. And, I found my report. I found some reports. And, the bottom line is you have to get through me. And I know people when people are lying to me. We wouldn't brought in Wade Robson and his entire family if we had believed for 1 second that he wasn't telling the truth, because we're not going to lie to them. Tom met with Robson in my presence, 15, 20 minutes before taking the stand. And the only thing Tom had to say to him was tell the truth. We've turned over the report. We've given them the information. We know what you told them. Just get up there and tell the truth. And now all of a sudden the truth doesn't match. And again, I've said it before, what's incredibly disturbing to me is that Wade's brother, Shane Robson, is a private investigator and a friend of mine, personal friend of mine. I became friends with him after the trial. We worked together. 2-3 weeks before this came out, before Leaving Neverland came out, which I knew absolutely nothing about, Shane and I went door to door looking for a witness in a murder out in a city called Pomona, at the east end of LA County. And Shane and I drove out there together, went door to door, interviewed a bunch of neighbors about this murder. There was a videotape of the murder, and we were looking for the camera. And he never said a word to me. And for the life of me, I don't understand why he wouldn't say anything. But at one point, it's like I said, we have to agree to disagree. He's going to support his brother. It's like, okay, it's his brother. Feel free. I get it.
Right. And I had Tom on, as you know. Tom, I don't know if you saw the interview that I did, and Tom talked about it and said, Wade was actually the first witness that you guys had, and was
the very first
under cross-examination from Ron Zonin, who was, from what Tom described, was an excellent ADA. And he was sat up there. I don't know how long he testified, but he never wavered that Michael never touched him inappropriately or did anything. And so now he comes out.
I think he was on the stand for about 3 or 4 hours. I think almost all the entire morning. And that's it. I don't care. I don't care for Ron Zonin. I didn't care for Tom Sneddon. Gordon Auchincloss was the other, the 3 attorneys. Not my favorite people, but incredibly qualified and certainly capable. And again, it's one thing to get through me, but to get through me, first you got to get through me. Then you got to get Tom, and then you got to get Ron Zonin. And I'm sorry, these guys are incredibly intelligent and educated. Again, Zonin, not my favorite person, but I still respect his work. I think he did a great job. Unfortunately, the case just was stupid. It didn't exist.
Yeah. And what I hate about these docuseries too, especially you're doing it on a dead man who can't defend himself. Michael went to trial. He was acquitted. You had a chance, if it was true to anything like that, you could have brought that up. But now you're trying to get the Circus del Soleil job, and he couldn't get that, and that's when he did the whole 180. And then I found out
total retribution.
Yeah, and I found out obviously from listening to Jermaine talk on with Pierce Morgan. He said how, and she later came out, but Michael's niece Brandy was apparently dating Wade at one time. So, and they broke up because he cheated on her with Britney Spears, and even I heard so. So she said he was completely lying.
So much for integrity. Yeah. Again, the bottom line is the whole thing is pathetic. The whole thing is a pathetic ruse to make money. I heard that his mother, Joy, was interviewed, and she described him as being, an Oscar-winning actor, or should have been an Oscar-receiving actor for, his nonsense. So even his mother, who knows him, doesn't believe him. So there was an incident. I don't want to get into a whole lot, but there was an incident involving Wade's sister. Now, this is after everything came out, and I'm the person accused of dragging him into this, so to speak. And there was an incident involving Wade's sister where she got into trouble, her husband, and their first phone call was to Shane Robson, her brother, again, private eye. And Shane's first phone call was to me. So, and we're talking incredibly serious. We're talking about a big, big, big to-do, which I'm not going to discuss here. But again, if I'm the bad person that did this to her brother, or enabled this person to get away with doing this to her brother, why are you calling me?
Yeah.
I'm the bad guy. I'm not the person you would call for help. I'm the bad evil, doesn't make any sense. So, whatever. He's out for money. Listen, it's not the first time it's been done. There was a producer, I don't know her name, woman contacted me, who was doing a thing on Robert Blake. They blamed a homeless guy who was dead. They blamed Christian Brando, who was dead. They blamed somebody. All of the potential suspects in Robert Blake's case, which is not a mystery, by the way. All of the potential suspects that she wanted to put into her idiotic. There was a used car salesman from Galpin something or other, big dealership out here in California, in Los Angeles. And this guy came in and he testified that he had some information, and he tried to insert himself. He was, like that person in OJ, the fake witness that saw the car speeding away and whatever.
Yeah.
This guy, this guy tried to insert himself in the Blake trial, and the prosecution even said, "No, you're insane." The prosecution said no. The judge said no. The defense said no. Yet he was the star person on this TV show by this producer. I mean, these people keep making these idiotic shows, and they, like you said, people are dead. They can't defend themselves, and why should they even have to?
Yeah. And very interesting. Earlier, you mentioned Sylvester Stallone, and I'm just thinking of Janice Dickerson, because I remember she had accused Sylvester Stallone of fathering a child, her child.
Right. And that turned out to not be true. And a lot of what she said, she lied. She was not living with Sly. He rented a house for her.
Right.
Here's the thing too that was very disturbing to me personally, and this became an issue of contention between not Tom but some other attorneys that were on the team. Sly was filming, I believe, Creed 2. He was in Pennsylvania, and
this is for Cosby, right?
For Cosby, he was in
this
Pennsylvania
is concerning
filming Creed 2, and they wanted me to contact him to bring him in as a potential rebuttal to Janice Dickerson. Eventually, I said no. I said, if you want to get him served, but I'm not, don't use me to participate. I have a relationship with these people. My radio show the opening was Frank Stallone actually did the opening. You're listening to All Things BI with, this is Frank Stallone. You're listening to All Things BI with Scott Ross.
Yeah.
So again, I have a friendship with the family. Again, and my point is that I said no, that number one, Sly is not on trial. Janice Dickerson is not on trial. We know she's a liar. So let it go. But ultimately Tom agreed that proving that Janice Dickerson is a liar, that's fine, but you still have 4 others. And those people were making an impact. And this judge, knowing Janice Dickerson is such an incredible liar and bringing her in, that was part of the prejudice. I mean, she was all dog and pony show to put the cameras in there.
And the judge was Stephen O'Neill.
Stephen O'Neill.
Right.
I mean, again, how do you change? What changed between the first and the second trial? Why do you need only one person? And when that one person in the first trial concluded, let me tell you if I can, something that I'm incredibly angry at. That person in the first trial concluded that her dates were years and years and years off. And that was part of the reason why they couldn't come to a conclusion on it. So what changed that caused O'Neill, instead of saying, okay, you can bring in one other person, but all of a sudden now it's 5 because he wanted to guarantee that conviction. He targeted him.
He targeted him, and as well as the DA running on that campaign. If you put me in, I'm going to get Bill Cosby.
Absolutely. The one thing that really angers me to this day about this, and it was what we talked about initially, is private investigators and how they're being trained. There was a private investigator that was working with the first attorney team that Stacy Brown, I know you know Stacy. Stacy ultimately did an article that the tape had been altered. The mother's recording of Mr. Cosby had been altered. And after the trial, when this was I took it to George Usher to listen to the tape, and lo and behold, he was right. Yeah. Did I lose you?
Wait, hold on 1 second, Scott. We're having a buffering issue. Hold on, let me try.
Okay.
Scott?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, I'm buffering. Yeah, so I know you were talking about Stacy and the tape being altered, and
it turns out Stacy was right. Yeah, Stacy was right. The tape had been altered, and I feel incredibly responsible because I didn't check it. It had already gone through the first trial. It had already been admitted into evidence in the first trial. I thought that somebody would have checked it. The investigator that had been hired to do, which was her responsibility, follows her name with a series of bullshit letters, CLI, CDC, blah, 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 all of this certified licensed investigator shit. Certified by who? I mean, she didn't do her job. She should have done that. And again, I feel responsible because I didn't do it. But I thought that, she's allegedly such the professional that she would have done this. And she didn't, because that tape should have never been admitted. And of course, even after the fact, when the court found out that it actually had been altered, because even their experts said it had been altered, number one, the woman that altered it was, what's her face, Andrea Constand's mother. They're in Canada. They're not going to extradite them for altering evidence. But the fact is that nobody tested it. In fact, neither did the police confirm or disconfirm that it had been altered, and it had been altered. And this prior private investigator who claims to be such the expert didn't test this, and I'm effing furious with her and these people that put up these bullshit organizations that we're going to certify you. Who certified them?
You won't give her name?
I don't want to use her name. You know what? It's on the internet. Look it up.
All right. Yeah. Well, that's true
Look
too.
it up. She knows who she is. She can look it up. But again, my personal opinion, welcome to the First Amendment. This woman doesn't know her ass from a hole in the ground. She had no business being involved. My low battery light just came on. She had no business being involved. And again, I just find it disgusting that people call themselves certified. So, okay, I'm certified. I'm as we speak, I'm certifying myself. Boom, I'm certified. Yeah. I mean, it's idiotic. And this is why.
I'm sorry, it wouldn't be, getting back just briefly, it wouldn't qualify as a Brady violation possibly if they didn't know it was altered?
No, because it was turned over, and Brady is only for things that would not have been turned over, because once it's turned over, you have the opportunity to test the veracity of the evidence. And as long as the evidence is turned over, and it was turned over, when all is said and done, it was turned over, but nobody ever tested it. And until Stacey got whatever information he got, and Stacey is a reporter, so he's not ever going to give up his source. So the only one that would have known that would have been a police officer. So, but how are you going to prove that? Because Stacey is protected by the First Amendment. He's not going to give up his source. And Gavin, can you talk for about 30 seconds? Let me grab my charger. I'm concerned.
Yes, of course. Do 30 seconds plug in. All right, guys, that is Scott Ross, private investigator. We are live. We are live on here on GBoot 2786, and we're also on Facebook.
I'm so sorry. My second warning light came on. I didn't want the computer to die. Did I lose you again? Gavin? Dude? Where do you be? Yeah. I don't know if charging it in caused the power surge. But I lost you. Yep, I lost you. Damn it. Would you like some more coffee? Sure. Let's have some more coffee. Yeah, Gavin, you need to come back, hon. You come back, buddy.
All right, man. I hate this internet connection. is acting up today.
Well,
Yeah,
I thought it
so
was because I plugged in my computer, but it gave me the second warning light, so it was about to go belly up. Anyway, it's plugged in now.
right. No, but you're doing good. I did want to ask you because you mentioned this. Just curious though, for all of those women, because you said you had to vet them because the judge wouldn't tell you what list. You looked at all 60 plus of them.
No, there was a list of 19, and the
Okay.
choices were going to be between these particular 19.
Right.
That field was narrowed down probably about 3 months before the trial. So from the 19, and I have no idea how he made the decision, the criterial decision that he made. But then it was supposed to be only going back to a certain period of time. Excuse me,
Right.
I think that was 1982, I believe it was 82, maybe 83.
Right.
Which I don't get. Again, I just don't get it. I don't understand how behavior in 82 has anything to do with, I mean, I can assure you I am not the same person I was in 1982 or 83.
And there's no
Right.
way to tell what exactly happened because there's no medical report. There's
Right.
no DNA kit. We don't even know if they even interacted with Bill Cosby.
Right.
And I'm just wondering where the hell did all of these women come from? The one lady that I did want to ask you was Shalana Lasha, who was convicted on falsifying the police report and
She had a
prostitution.
she had a significantly large criminal history, and the
She
judge
had a
prevented
warrant
her.
for her arrest too.
Yeah.
So why was she allowed to testify? How the fuck is that possible? She wasn't even taken into custody afterwards.
I got an anonymous phone call. I have a picture of her smoking crack 3-4 weeks before the trial. I have several pictures of her smoking crack a couple weeks before the trial. I got an anonymous phone call from a woman who would not identify herself, who sent me these pictures. And what do we? We can't authenticate them. There's nothing we can do with them.
Right.
But I got phone call after phone call. There was Evie Quaid, Randy Quaid, and Evie Quaid were constantly calling me regarding Janice Dickerson, and were furious about the lies that she was telling in her book. And then she got up there and, what was her idiotic license? Poetic license. So
Poetic license, yeah.
Poetic license, poetic license,
right.
poetic license.
And if you go and listen to that story, I know you didn't want to spend too much time on Cosby, but
it's your time. I'll do whatever you want. This is your time. I don't care.
All right. Well, thank you. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I wanted to listening to. I was reading a testimony on one of the news sites where they were talking about how Tom was cross-examining her, and with direct examination. And one of the things she said, how she met Cosby, she said that she was filming in Bali, I believe, for a calendar. Not filming, but she was posing for a calendar.
Right.
And he somehow reaches out to her or tracks her down and has dinner with Cosby in Nevada, I believe, or wherever it was.
Yeah, allegedly flew her back to Los Angeles from.
Right.
Yeah.
And tells Bill Cosby while they're talking with him and his musical director, who wasn't named, she states that she complained about cramps. Now, what woman? I don't know any woman that actually tells anybody that they're, especially a man, that they're in the middle of menstrual cramps at dinner. That's something that you keep private. And as she gives her this pill, she takes it and she gets, I guess, drowsy at some point while the musical director's there, and she's still walking up with Bill Cosby to the bedroom. So what she said, it completely contradicts what she put in her book. It was so full of bullshit. It was all bullshit. Even with all 60 women, they didn't go to the police immediately. And I think from what Andrew told me, well, he didn't tell me, but he told Nicole in an interview, he said, if you look at the New York Reporter that had all of those women come on there, only 12 of them alleged rape or something along those lines. The rest are, he bumped against me, he touched me inappropriately, and all of that should never have been, allowed. And I think that even if Tom, had teamed up with Johnny Cochran and they formed a new dream team, I think that they were still going to find because they had it out for him. And I think that they were trying to create this, to push this Me Too narrative more in the media. And, I think it was also hella racial. Typically when I see a black, of course, when there's a black suspect and the victim is usually white, there's always a racial element there in the jury room. And I do know about the juror who allegedly said we could all go home, he's guilty. The
Right.
judge allowed him to stay on.
Right.
Could you tell everyone about that, what you remember? Or
Well, yeah, in fact, I went out and somebody else telephonically interviewed, separate issue, somebody telephonically interviewed this gal, and then we had to get her to sign a declaration. So I had to go out and meet with her. I met with her and her daughter at a Burger King, and had to literally like sell them a used Buick to get them to sign the declaration because they didn't want to bring any attention to themselves, and sort of explain how things work, and that she would ultimately have to come in and testify, and explain, if nothing else. And that was done behind closed doors, where she came in and sort of reiterated what she had been told. And again, the judge was looking, I was questioned, the judge questioned everybody, and he was looking for any excuse. But I want to go back to Cosby for a minute. That part of the other problem that people seem to not pay attention to is the judge put Cosby in almost an impossible position when they read the deposition transcripts that he was granted immunity for, and then
right,
agreed to the deposition. And I don't know who the idiot attorney was that would have even allowed that to happen, but whatever. The fact remains that when he did his deposition, he said that he gave quaaludes to women. And then a couple minutes later, he said, well, woman, one. And
right,
that portion, I don't know if that got read into, but there was also no information that the individual that he supplied a quaalude to was also done voluntarily. It was not something that was snuck into a drink. It wasn't Rohypnol. It wasn't a
right,
roofie. It wasn't whatever. This was something that she had requested, and I don't know if he did it with
right,
her or whatever.
right.
And again, when you misspeak and you say women, well,
And
woman, the judge took the position, we'll let Mr. Cosby get up there and correct it.
he has a Fifth Amendment right now,
Exactly.
not to, but he basically was, yeah. But yeah, and I know the woman I think you were talking about, but I've read reports, yeah, that these and part of what you mentioned in that deposition, um, I've read the actual deposition. What was released, I think, it was a plaintiff's opposition motion for sanctions against the defendant's attorney, where Troiani had pieces of the deposition where Bill Cosby answers the question, have you ever given, a woman a quaalude or something like that? He says yes, and then the media spuns with it and says, well, he's admitting to drugging women, which is not correct, because
Right.
before they asked him was it involuntary, his attorney objects, and Bill Cosby's defense attorney also filed a response to that. And I don't know if all of this was read to the jury, but Bill Cosby says never once does he say that he gave it to a woman involuntarily. He always, when they asked him,
Correct.
was it done without their consent? He said no, no.
Right.
And quaaludes were big pills. They weren't something I think you could just slip
Well,
into somebody's drink.
and under the issue of prior bad acts, under the issue of relevance, under California 1108 or the federal statute of 404B, under the prior bad act statutes, if you read them, quaaludes are white. We're always white. Nothing
Right.
to do with a blue pill that Andrea Constant identified. And they've never made a blue quaalude. So for that to even come in when he handed her pills, they're not the same. It doesn't have what's called the same
It's right.
footprint. It's supposed to have the same footprint, and it doesn't. If it's an unidentified white pill, it's fine. But this was a blue pill that she took 3 halves of, that again, and Benadryl is a blue pill. So it makes no sense that we're not allowed to discuss that, but yet they can talk about quaaludes.
Yeah. And I wanted to talk. So I was just trying to figure out if anyone, and I've been doing research on this, had anyone researched any and all of the women who have come out? Because of course I've seen and read reports where they have questionable backgrounds, but I've seen some of them actually, but still get on. Dr. Phil, I believe he had Beth Ferrier on, and I think she was the woman that they mentioned. I could be wrong. I don't want to say the wrong thing, but I know Chloe Goins has come out, but they were able to prove that when she gave a date, for instance, she said assaulted her at the Playboy Mansion. Bill Cosby was not even there, according to the records. Yeah.
Yeah. And that case was ultimately dismissed because I did a little bit on that with that was Harlan Braun was the one that represented Cosby for that particular case in LA County. And what she said was ultimately said that it was when she woke up that he was sucking her toes. So kind of bizarre, but there is no statute against that, even if she was underage. Years ago, and I always get in trouble for bringing this up, but years ago, I worked on a case where some stripper alleged that she had been sexually assaulted by this celebrity, and she was working at the time. I had her time cards to prove that she was at work. The location that she said that this happened at was alarmed with motion sensors, and the alarm had been set. I had people that she had admitted to that she was trying to get some publicity so that she could do like a spread in Playboy, like Jessica Hahn, who, with Jim Baker, the evangelist, and Jessica Hahn got $1 million. And so this girl's theory was, well, if I get enough publicity, then Playboy she's a stripper. She takes clothes off all the time. And Playboy would give her $1 million. And again, but when I came up with all of this and I went to somebody I know in the media and I said, listen, I can prove it didn't happen. Oh, we don't care about that. We don't want to hear that. We're done. That we've moved on. It's just the media. They want the sensationalism. If there's no sensational, it's like Robert Blake. Robert Blake's no mystery. He hired someone to do it. There's no mystery, and I don't know what else I can say. He didn't pull the trigger, but they charged him with pulling the trigger. He didn't pull the trigger. He was actually not guilty of the murder, but they should have charged him with strictly solicitation. And that was a deputy DA, a very high up DA, head of major crimes, who I like and get along with really well. I don't know what he was doing or why he did that. Bucking for promotion, looking to run, trying to get a name for himself. I don't know why people do what they do, but that's why they lost.
Yeah. And, Mr. Cosby is in prison now. He's actually gone through 2 years.
Not quite. Yeah, September.
Almost in September. And 3 to 10 years. And he said he's prepared to do all 10 because he's not he's not going to admit to anything he didn't do.
Yeah, and he shouldn't. And the other side of the coin is I doubt that he'll do much more than the 3 years because the state of California Department of Corrections, their medical facilities were taken over by the government, the feds, and back in like 1996 because they weren't giving people proper medical attention. And they're required, he's a ward of the state, they're required now to take care of Mr. Cosby. So all of his medical needs and medical attention have to be taken care of. The state is responsible for it. So once he gets in his 3 years, his minimum without any prior history, they should be giving him the boot, and he's not really required to admit to anything if he doesn't choose to. But I would be hard pressed to believe that he'll spend more than 3 years in prison. So
I'm hoping he could get out sooner, especially with this pandemic. And
yeah, I don't see that.
Well, I know that Andrew was talking about doing that because he actually had to have surgery on his carotid artery, if I'm not mistaken. And
I didn't know that. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, he had blood clot. I think it was blood clots or something like that. But just it's a terrible position that he's in, and it's fucked up. I think it's wrong, and I think people in the media ought to be ashamed of themselves.
I agree, and I'm really sorry.
The way that they,
you know, on a personal note, I'm really sorry that Stacey Brown is not coming forward with whoever gave him that accurate information, where that came from, because if it came from the prosecution, it's misconduct. And again, I get protecting your sources, but in the same respect, Stacey came forward and testified against Michael, didn't he? You know, so I don't really, again, I don't dislike Stacey. I have no interest in having lunch with him. He's a nice dresser, but the bottom line is I don't understand where he draws the line in what he should protect and what he should be truthful. And he knows who gave him that information. And if it was law enforcement, then he knows that the police knew that the tape had been altered, and somebody needs to be responsible for that. The man is sitting in prison, and I think it's inexcusable. And I'm sorry that Stacey, and I hope he sees this, I'm sorry that he feels compelled to play this First Amendment nonsense and not tell the truth.
I just want to ask you a question about another question about it. Who do you think could be behind something like this that's doing it to Bill Cosby? Because to get all of those women to come out some 20, 30, 40 years later, I had read campaign contributions for Mr. Steele. I did see and hear that there was someone, I've heard from Andrew Wyatt, he said that Comcast had given money to Steele's not Steele, excuse me.
Kevin Steele.
I'm thinking of O'Neill. Yeah, but Kevin Steele. And I've heard things of that nature because I just don't. Who could be doing something like this?
Well, but you have to also remember that Bruce Castro was not a supporter of Mr. Cosby. Castro was looking at this from a realistic standpoint, and that there were trouble with the dates, and Castro was saying that there was trouble with credibility, and that Castro said, listen, if we formally announce we're not going to charge him, let LA County handle it with the Chloe Goins thing. He stepped aside and formally said, we're not going to be charging him. So there was no justification for him not giving his deposition in the civil matter. And so it's not as, even though Kevin Steele was out to get him, it's not as if Castro wasn't, but Castro was looking at it from a more realistic standpoint. Can I prove my case? And in fact, quite the contrary. We proved, in the closing argument, we were able to prove conclusively that it didn't happen in January of 2004.
And there was a statute of limitations defense time raised.
Right. Absolutely. If anything, it was December of, if you want to say it happened, whatever, it would have been December of 2003, because, number one, Cosby was only in the state one day, and that was January 21st. She said this was after her cousin, or before her cousin had come out. Her cousin came out something like January 18th. And on January 21st, she was in Rhode Island with the Temple basketball team. So it didn't happen on January 21st. And when all is said and done, Mr. Cosby had no eyesight. People were driving him. He had drivers. He was in New York. He was all over the road. He was in Arizona. We had his flight records. We had his appointments, his show records, and he just wasn't
Scott,
there.
Let me stop you. When you said she came out, her cousin came out in January 18th, she's talking about what? Her cousin coming out of the closet?
No, her cousin came down from Canada to Pennsylvania to visit with her.
I didn't know what you.
Sure, understood. And she was trying to reference her time frame. This happened before my cousin came into town. Let's put it that way.
Right.
So her cousin, I guess, stayed with her. So she said this was before her cousin came down from Toronto to Pennsylvania to visit with her, stay with her, whatever the case may be. And so again, this is how she was trying to isolate the time. And you know what? The fact is that she was wrong on the time. Let's just, argument's sake, let's say it happened. Great, fine, whatever. The point is that it was outside the statutory period. And yet nobody seemed to care. The jurors couldn't have cared less, And this is the problem with having a trial by jury. And sometimes you want a judicial trial, you want a bench trial, because again, if you get somebody who's looking at the facts, the paperwork, everything supported that it didn't happen in January. If you want to say it happened, then it happened in February. I'm sorry, in December.
Right.
But
And you had the flight records that show Cosby was not.
We had the records from his appearances. We had the flight records, the FAA official FAA records. We had a flight person who attributed, said that these are the records that are kept by the pilots. Yeah, I mean, again, it was there's just no gray area. It didn't happen. If cell records would have been available down the road, we would have had the cell records. We would have been able to prove through the cell records, but they weren't available. And, little to nothing that I can do with those at that point.
Right, and the statute of limitations, I think, was 12 years, if I'm not mistaken. So if it was December of 2003, that would have been 2015. By the time he files it, it would have been too late.
It had to be, they filed it December 31st of whatever, 2015, I guess. And and so it had to be a 2004 incident to fall within that statutory period, but it wasn't. It was a December 2003 issue, and I don't know what else I can say. Even when you prove something, it doesn't matter. You're talking about 12 people. The old joke is 12 people not smart enough to get off jury duty, and you have people who in these types of cases who want to be on jury duty. If you go back to OJ, there was an HBO special called Juror Number 5 about some guy that got kicked off of jury duty, some FedEx delivery employee that got kicked out of jury duty, and they got kicked off the jury, and yet he got his own HBO special. Raymond Hume, the two elderly white couple, they weren't a couple, but a man and a woman from Michael Jackson's, after they didn't get the book deal, because how do you write a book about something that didn't happen? How do you get a book deal when you've acquitted him? They went out publicly and said, well, we want to change our vote. You can't do that.
Can't do that.
Now we want to say he's guilty, which would have only led to a hung jury anyway. It wouldn't even have
right.
made. So, and then again, Aphrodite Jones, classic example of that lunatic Aphrodite Jones, who screamed and screamed and screamed in front of every camera on the planet that Michael was guilty. Michael's guilty. All of a sudden, nobody's going to buy her stupid ass book because Michael wasn't guilty. So now it's the Michael Jackson conspiracy. She writes a book how Michael was getting framed. Oh, I finally read the discovery and decided blah, blah, blah.
Right.
This is what these people do. Diane Diamond made a career out of, she was showing pictures during the trial of a jail cell. How did she get into a prison to get a picture of a cell, unless maybe it was stock photo? But she's showing pictures on the news. This is where Michael is going to, here they show Neverland. Here's Michael's home.
I remember that. Yeah.
This is where he's going to spend the rest of his life.
Right. And Tom and I, well, we talked about it too. Tom and I, he described it as a meat circus. And even with Cosby, he called it the most unfair trial he had ever been part of. And he tries cases in the South, capital murder cases. And with Michael,
and he wins. He goes into Louisiana Alabama. Goes to Alabama and he tries to
take Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And Barry Gordy, I think, told Tom, when they had brunch after the trial, he told him, he said, you cost the network about $1 billion. And he said, what are you talking about? He said, well, they would have had Michael Jackson documentaries and TV watches, Michael Jackson TV watch every day. If they had this. Now, I don't think they have that necessarily. It created the same thing with Bill Cosby, because Bill didn't have the fan base, that Michael had. Michael's fans are universal, around the world.
Well,
and even when this thing came out, they checked.
And Cosby wrote a book that was sort of insulting to everybody. It wasn't just the white population. He insulted the African American population.
Yeah.
And, he wrote his book about whatever. And look, welcome to the First Amendment. You say anything you want. God love you. So he had followed.
Well, it was the pound cake speech. The pound cake speech that they always go to. Yeah, but that he did. But he did that, at the NAACP 50th anniversary of Brown versus the Board of Education.
Yeah.
And someone from the press was recording that. And so once it was recorded, then all hell broke loose because you got Michael Eric Dyson writing a book, Is Bill Cosby Right? And Michael Eric Dyson had been, on these campaigns saying how Bill Cosby was guilty and so forth, quoting and believing Beverly Johnson. And Beverly Johnson's own manager, who was also Janice Dickerson's manager, said they were both lying. I don't know if you knew this, but Beverly Johnson and Bill Cosby were in a movie together. They did The Media Man back in 1993. Nobody remembers it because it was a flop of a movie, but I remember it because Robert Townsend was the director of the film, and Bill Cosby actually worked for nothing for scale.
Robert Townsend, kind of a really skinny comedian.
Yeah, Robert Townsend that did Hollywood Shuffle. He actually directed Bill Cosby's final comedy special that was going to air on Netflix, but it got taken off because of Janice Dickerson's allegations.
Oh, yeah, I know who he is. Yeah, he's funny. He was a comedian. He did some stand-up.
Right. He had been on Rodney Dangerfield's special, Young Comedian special. Yeah, back in the day. Yeah.
I didn't watch any of that stuff. But I know who he is. He played a singer in a movie, Streets of Fire, I think. He was in the movie. I recognized him from when I was watching the movie Streets of Fire. I don't know if you ever saw it.
I'm familiar with it.
Very strange. Who?
Diane Lane is in it, right?
Diane Lane? Yeah, Lane. Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, Diane Lane. Yeah, he's in it. Michael Pare, and it's a weird sci-fi kind of, but I liked it. I got the soundtrack.
Good to know.
But anyway, yeah, the thing of it is that it's look, you're guilty until proven innocent, and this has been my complaint from the beginning. And you're subjected to the personalities of the judges. You're subjected to the personalities of the district attorneys. You're subjected to these cops who want to write a book. Ron Ito, who to this day publicly denies, but not to his friends. Ron Ito was the lead detective in Robert Blake's case, and Ron is Lance Ito's first cousin, Judge Ito's first cousin. Yeah. They don't go public with it because they think that it would be problematic, but people who know Ron and Lance knew that. Anyway, fast forward. So Ron Ito, when he was testifying in Robert Blake's prelim, my favorite line ever of all time, when he was up testifying and Tom said during the prelim, "You have a book deal." And again, I love Ron. Don't get me wrong. Ron is a friend of mine. And in fact, ironically, he's now working for the LA County Public Defender. He's now doing criminal defense work, if you can believe it. But his response was not anymore. Instead of just saying no, he said not anymore. But, he was working on a book deal, and Miles Corwin and Robert Blake was an LA Times reporter that was following the homicide division around, writing a book about LAPD robbery homicide division, not so much Michael Jackson, but was called out to the scene or went to the scene with the detectives on Robert Blake's case. And all of the detectives, with the exception of Steve Iguchi, denied his existence. Steve Iguchi is still an LAPD detective and a friend of mine. Police have to keep logs, they call them chronos, of how you get from point A to point Q. Down the road, if God forbid a cop retires or gets killed, the case isn't going to stop. So you have to maintain records. And Steve Iguchi was the only one that actually indicated that Miles Corwin was present for several of these things. And the LAPD flat out denied it until Eric Leonard, who is now a reporter with NBC, was with KFI Radio. Eric Leonard was at the scene, called me, and took pictures of Miles Corwin at the scene with a flashlight, canvassing the area with the detectives. And again, those pictures were ultimately used, and it's the misrepresentation of the LAPD, but nothing ever came of it. And this is the problem. You're dealing with individual personalities. This scumbag up in Minnesota, I hope they get a real judge. I hope they get somebody who is, not one of these pro-cop crazy people, and who allows all of this to come in. And like I said, the upside for the non-intentional aspect is it's almost as if he's going to be forced to testify, you know?
Right.
So,
Yeah. You know, it's very something interesting. I did listen to Stacy's interview before we go. Stacy's interview with Andrew. He actually said that he had recommended Tom to Andrew, which
okay.
was interesting because he said there was no love lost. But I didn't know.
Nope.
I saw he had written books against Michael and said different things, but I didn't know why he exactly testified against Michael. Or what was it that his role in that?
Yeah, to tell you the truth, I don't remember, but he was a last-minute rebuttal witness called by the prosecution.
Okay.
That I forget exactly what it is that he had to say, but again, being a reporter, you know, this is what I'm saying doesn't make sense. And Stacy, I hope you watch this, and I hope you call me, but it doesn't make sense. How do you, if you're a reporter and you're supposed to be an independent reporter, why are you sticking your nose into Michael's case, number one? And then when Cosby's getting railroaded, why aren't you sticking your nose into it then and come forward with the information the way that you came forward with this now proven to be not true information in Michael's case? So now we know that the tape was a forgery. So my response is the same to Stacy. You need to come forward and tell us where you got that information, because it's true. We've confirmed it. The prosecution confirmed it. We confirmed it. I think it was used in part of the appeal. And if I'm not mistaken, you know, the prosecution's position was, yeah, well, whatever. It wasn't what they based their decision on, so it doesn't matter. And it does matter.
It
You
does
know,
matter. Yeah,
it
I heard
does
that there
matter.
was. I heard a report from Stacy. I read the report that there was possible jury tampering about a book deal that they were offered. I don't know how true that is.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me. But again, the point is, like you said with Michael, I'm at a loss to understand why he would get involved with that, why he would go to the extreme to come forward to get, you know, to actually get in there and testify against Michael. Yet with Cosby, he sat in the back of the room and kept his mouth shut. I for the life of me, I don't get it. So Stacy, if you're watching, if you're listening, whatever, you got my number. You know how to reach me. ScottRoss.com, 818-744-9827. That's my cell phone. Have at it. You know?
And the website is scottross.org. Scott, let me just share it with everyone before we get on out of here.
It's being redesigned, so whatever you're sharing is not going to be the same as it was.
Okay.
In 2 weeks, it's not going to be what you got now, so it's fine. You know,
Uh,
yeah. And if somebody has questions, you know,
okay, well,
I'm perfectly fine with phone calls. I'm perfectly fine with emails. Yeah, I don't want. Yeah. You know, again, if anybody has any questions, call me. Send me an
look,
email. Call me. Feel free.
Scott, you are a cartoon with Mike next to Michael Jackson.
So here's the story. So Bill Robles, who is a artist, court artist, Bill Robles, I've known forever, called me. When did Michael die? 2010?
Michael died in 2009.
9.
June 25th. Yeah.
Okay. So it was June 25th, for argument's sake. Bill calls me and he says, you know what, I'm cleaning out my house. I got a bunch of stuff. I got to get rid of some of this stuff. Do you want it? And I said, you know, Bill, I love your stuff. I think it's great. You know, you get a lot of money for this. And I'm not an egomaniac. I don't care. And he goes, look, you know, I've got these two. I've got this one and I've got this other one. He said, you know, I'll give them both to you for $700. And I said, okay. So my wife and I went over to Bill's house, literally went over to Bill's place Monday, bought them, which means I now own the rights to them because I own them, the originals. Michael died Friday.
Yeah. He died
joke.
on Thursday.
Whatever. If I bought them Monday, if I bought them Monday, Michael died Thursday. Literally, I got them the Monday before.
Yeah.
And I talked to Bill, and Bill said, you know, I talked to him about a month later on something unrelated, and he said, you know, the price would have tripled at that point. And I said, then I wouldn't have bought them, but I appreciate it. So, but yeah, so I have that, and I have.
Well, that was a good one. Doubt on it.
Yeah, but you know, he's a great artist. I mean, Tom's got a bunch of Bill's stuff up in Tom's office, but Bill Robles is the best. He's amazing, absolutely amazing artist, and a sweetheart, nice guy. He's on Facebook. Look at this stuff on Facebook. Bill Robles.
Bill Robles. Everybody look him up if you're interested.
Everybody look up Bill. Yeah, I mean that's such a talent, because you sit in the back of the courtroom and you only have a very, very limited length of time that you can do this. By the way, if anybody's asking questions, because I saw something just popped up, if somebody has a question,
Yeah, anybody got questions?
Yeah,
no one hasn't put anything just yet.
Okay.
Let me see, because I'm streaming on Facebook as well.
Okay.
Some people write different things, so I'm not able to see it on one different set. Hold on.
Yeah, but if anybody has a question, feel free.
Yeah. Well,
I'm a talker. How long has it been gone now?
we've been gone for an hour and 30 plus minutes.
Sorry.
It's all good. It's been good.
I don't know how long you want to go.
Yeah, this was great, man, just to do this. But Regina just was saying hello. I saw my friend Garrick is part of the Believe Bill Cosby team. He says he was talking about the Minnesota case. He said this looks premeditated. Notice the same state that convicted a Somalian police officer who shot a white woman and let another Latino police officer off for killing Philando Castile, but fired them. That's a good point. Like we said earlier, I know that from the information we have, apparently it looks like they're at least they work together now. And what happened, that's something that they would all have to find out later. But just the brutality of the video, just looking at it was graphic and hard to watch. And you see him actually putting his hands inside
his pocket, casual. Yeah, as casual as could be.
Yeah, as casual as can be. But you know, he's trying to put more pressure.
Mm-hmm. Oh, he's rolling he's rolling his knee back and forth. Oh yeah,
right.
Yeah, you know, again, it's not even the brutality that's disturbing to me. It's the arrogance. Like, people are videotaping me, and I don't care. I can do whatever I want to do. There's not a damn thing you can do about it. I'm in charge. I'm the boss. I'm in charge. Again, that's the disturbing part. The actual death part is awful. Don't misunderstand. But that's not the disturbing part. The disturbing part is the behavior of the police.
Right.
The other guy, the Asian guy who's standing in the street like, he can hear the same thing everybody else can hear. The guy can't breathe. And all he has to do is go over and say, here, let's just put him in the back of the car. There's a crowd gathering, pick him up.
And there's another video that was released, actually, that showed he was in the police car, and it appears one of the officers is attacking him inside the car. The Asian cop is standing there looking at the cameras across the street. You could see them. So they took him out of the car. And all of this over a forged bill that we don't even think, like we said earlier, I don't even know if he had anything to do with that. You know, he's innocent till proven guilty.
Exactly. It doesn't matter. The burden of proof is on the police. You know, I tell people all the time, and I recently wrote an article, but I tell people all the time, when you get stopped by the police, the first thing, yes, he looked very arrogant. He did. It was disgusting. The first thing that you ask the police, am I free to go? The minute they say no, then don't answer any questions. You'll never, ever hear a police read your Miranda rights and say anything you say can and will be used to help you in a court of law. That's not what they say. Anything you say can and will be used against you. They don't ever say, listen, if you talk to me, I can help you, because that's not what they're there to do. That's not their intent. They wouldn't have stopped you. You know, again, I can go on story after story after story, but the bottom line is when the police pull you over, when I get pulled over for a ticket, you get pulled over for a ticket, they say, do you know why I stopped you? What they're waiting for you to do is admit to it.
Admit to it, yeah.
And when you leave, what you don't know is the cop turns the ticket over and he writes down what you said, his recollection of what you said. And again, so when the cop pulls you over and they say, do you know why I stopped you? Your response is, I do not. End it. No further conversation. Because whatever they write down, they still have the burden of proof. Plain and simple. But when you say, I was going too fast, you know, then or I didn't stop that stop sign or whatever idiotic comment that you make, again, you will never, ever hear the police say anything you say can and will be used to help you in a court of law. Not going to happen.
Absolutely. That's a little advice from the PI and the attorney. Always plead the fifth, guys. Courtney Jarrell, shout out to her. Shout out to Garland, Brown, Brittany Dunn, Gina Palmer, who was here, and everyone else on YouTube. Everybody's going to be checking out this video. We had quite a few viewers, man, and I really appreciate you just giving your time to talk.
Can I then ask your viewers for a monstrous favor?
What's that? Go ahead.
Everybody do what you can to get in touch with Stacy and ask Stacy to come forward and cut loose with the information. Where did he find out that that tape was altered? Tell the truth. Don't hide behind this First Amendment crap. I get it.
He is a face. Yeah, Stacy is a Facebook friend. I know him too, so
I know you do, and that's what I'm saying. I think
I've never met him personally.
I have.
Yeah,
nice looking guy, very pleasant. But you know, snappy dresser. No, I'm not gay. Snappy dresser. You know, and incredibly intelligent. He's a great conversationalist. I get why he's a writer. But you know what? I say it again, Stacy, I'm asking you for the 97th freaking time, dude. You need to come forward and tell us where you got it from. Stacy Brown.
Stacy Brown, Regina, because she said she was late.
Yeah.
Stacy Brown is an investigative journalist, and he covered extensively the Bill Cosby case.
He covers everything. He
covers everything.
Yeah, he does what's the word? And I think it's Stacy is spelled Stacey, by the way. Stacy Brown.
Right.
Just put Stacy Brown journalist. You'll find him, no doubt about it.
Right. And Stacy, right. And so to let Regina know, since you were late, what Scott has been talking about is the Bill Cosby case, whereas we talked a part about it. But what happened was that there was a piece of tape that was altered. It's been proven that was altered, that Andrea Constand's mother used to record Bill Cosby over the phone when she was alleging Bill Cosby did something to her daughter. And
you know what's also interesting, if I can interrupt. So Andrea Constand's sister is married to I think Durham City police officer. So I can't help but wonder if Andrea Constand's mother and her son-in-law, the police officer, conspired to sort of create this recording and turned it over to law enforcement. And just the simple fact that a police officer, because Andrea Constand's brother-in-law, this Durham police officer, when he was advised of the situation, took her to the local police department to make a report that was subsequently forwarded in Canada, that was subsequently forwarded to Montgomery County law enforcement. And again, you know, my concern is that if the son-in-law, Andrea's brother-in-law, had any involvement in that recording, and that's why I think it's so important that then it was tampered by a cop. And that's why I think, I don't care if it was a U.S. cop or a Canadian cop, but that's why I think it's so important that Stacy needs to come forward with who's the one that gave him that information. Once again, because the information was spot on accurate. Good for you, Stacy, but stop the nonsense. Tell us who told you about it.
I would think that would be a great thing, especially to help Mr. Cosby's case if he would bring that information out.
Yeah.
But, Clay says hello. Hello, Clay. How are you? And Regina says she's going to be writing that down. But Scott, thank you again. Good luck with the criminology course. What have you? I wanted to ask you this too. Have you started a website for that, or?
Well, I had to have my website redesigned, long story, and I am now trying to figure out how to do it. Again, I want people to know that these people that are studying criminology, the people that are in reality are not going to become police officers, that there is another avenue for them. It's a real avenue. I mean, you can still be a detective, you know, again, this young lady that's worked with me for over a year, Jamie, is disabled. She's never going to be a police officer. It has nothing to do with her intelligence, her ability, her understanding, her you know, again, and it bothers me that schools are not teaching people that there's an alternative, that it's not just about being a cop. And if, you know, they sort of teach you how to be a cop, and if you don't make it as a cop, then, you know, you you don't have the ability, and that's just absolutely not true. Again, I hope Jamie doesn't get upset with me. I adore her, but the fact is that she is just as good of a detective as anybody. She just needs the training, and she's been working for about 1.5 years getting the training. And again, she'll sooner or later she'll be great, but she's not ever, even if she went to college and got a PhD in criminology, she's not going to get hired by a police department, and Jamie knows it. But again, one has nothing to do with the other, and it really bothers me when when you see people who are going to school because this is what they want to do, and nobody tells them that there's an alternate route. Nobody told me. I mean, I've sort of figured it out, but not everybody is that fortunate, and that's why I need to figure out how to get that spread out to the public. I'd like to teach it because I want to get away from these psychopaths that get this alphabet soup crap that screwed up Mr. Cosby's recording, that this should have never been there, kind of thing, and it would have never gotten by me. And I'm embarrassed. I'm embarrassed at the fact that I didn't test it myself, but I figured it was supplied by the police. It was cleared by this whole other legal team. It was admitted into evidence. I assumed, and the old assume analogy, and it's embarrassing. I'm sorry to say, I feel stupid that it got by me. Fool me once. And but this is part of the reason why I want people to know that there's a whole other world out there of criminal defense. And it's a misnomer, because criminal defense makes it sound like you're defending the criminals, and that's not true. My job and my functionality, in my opinion, is policing the police. If you don't watch the cops, you end up with Chauvins of the world. You end up with this Daryl Gates types, and Ray Perez's, and somebody has to police the police, and that's my job. That's what I do. I really don't care whether Cosby did it or not. That's not the issue. I defended a guy that allegedly threw his 4-year-old daughter off a cliff. I don't care if he didn't do it, but I'm saying it wouldn't matter even if he did. The point being is that the police don't get to just run rickshod over us and do whatever the hell they want to do. And when they get away with it, you get situations like Minnesota. You get these arrogant pieces of crap that are on camera. Couldn't care less. What are you going to do about it?
Right, and all of those 4 officers should be behind bars right now.
Oh, they're going to have to file federal charges on the other ones. I'm sure of that. Part of the problem, and one of the things that you learn in this, is that state and local authorities arrest and then investigate. The feds investigate and then arrest. So once this has been turned over to the Bureau, so the Bureau will investigate this, and then they'll file charges. Mm-hmm. And I can't even keep Gavin awake. So the Bureau will these people, that's okay. These other 3 cops will get charged, but again, it's going to be a while, because that's how the Bureau works. And again, I don't want people to get upset that they're not charging them immediately. That's not how it's going to work. These are civil rights violations. This is federal jurisdiction. Yeah.
Well, on that note, Scott, thank you once again. Thank you all for tuning in. Scott, don't leave just yet, but I'm going to end the broadcast in a minute. Guys, thank you once again. This has been another episode of Gavin Richard Presents. I hope you all are blessed and feeling safe. Thank you once again, Scott. And if you have any questions or anything, you can follow me on GavinRich2786 on Twitter, as well as my Instagram, GRich2786. Please donate to the channel. I have the Cash App and PayPal emails and hashtag names listed below, and you see it on the ticker right there. So please subscribe and donate. Thank you all, and be blessed.
Take care. Thank you.
Thank you.